Good evening and thank you for coming tonight to our finance seminar. This is the first seminar of 4 that we're going to do this year. The topic for tonight is mechanics of a school district budget. The first part of the conversation that we'll have is regarding state budgets throughout the entire state of Illinois, and then we'll be talking in the second half about specifics to Dunlap School District.
The purpose of a school district budget is to meet Illinois legal requirements. That's the first thing on the list. But more importantly is it provides expending and taxing authority for the school board. It allows them and the administration to run the district on a daily basis. The other important factor of a budget is it allows us to easily share financial information with you, our community, and also our local, state, and federal governments. There are several legal steps that must be taken in order to create and adopt a budget. The first step is that the board must designate an administrator to develop the budget. In a district our size, that's typically someone like me in the business office, or in a smaller district, it can be the superintendent. We are required to provide a minimum of a 30-day public notice period, including where the budget can be viewed and when the budget hearing is scheduled before a budget can be adopted. This is the case whether it be a tentative budget, the final budget, or an amended budget. The final budget for the district must be adopted by September 30th. Once the budget is adopted, it must be posted on our website. The next slide talks about the budget development calendar. The budget process is ongoing. We are managing one fiscal year while planning for another fiscal year and closing out another fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. So that's the cycle that I'm going to run through with you. But on this page, it's really about a 15-month process that I'm going to run through. So July through September is when we're closing out the previous fiscal year, working with the auditor to get them all the paperwork they need to be able to do the annual audit. October and November is when the audit is completed, and we share in October the audit with the school board and our community, and then that we begin developing the tax levy for the next school year. In November, a tentative levy will be approved by the board, and then in December, a levy hearing will be held for the public, and then the board will approve the final levy at its December board meeting, and it will be filed with the county clerk by the last Tuesday of December. January through April is where we really look at the needs of the district and where our expenditures are going to fall for next year. Enrollment and staff needs are a big part of that discussion, what programs, what the needs are of the students, and what we need to see. We talk with administrators, teachers, support staff, parents, the community to get information to build the budget. Then in May, the tentative budget is shared with the Board of Education and made available to the public for inspection. And then in June, the tentative budget hearing is held and the board approves the tentative budget. This gives us the authority to spend money when July 1 gets here to run the district on a daily basis. July and August are really spent tweaking the budget for the upcoming school year. A lot of times we don't know from the state and federal perspective what our amounts really will be, so those are tweaked when grant amounts come in July and August. Then the budget is given to the board in August for information and posted out for the public review for 30 days, and then it goes to the board for action in September and is adopted, and then submitted to the State Board of Education. When planning the budget, our goal is obviously to always provide a balanced budget. And in order to do this, we have to proactively plan and watch what's happening in our local community and the state. Locally, we look at student growth projections and staffing needs, facility needs, salary agreements, wage guidelines, benefit costs, and we also look at local property values. What's happening with development trends? Is commercial going up? Is residential going up? Is one going down? Looking at those. And then property value. Does the economy show growth or reduction? For us, it's 79% of our money comes from property taxes. So what's happening with our local development and our local property value is very, very important to us. The other side that we're constantly watching is the state of Illinois. And we have conversations with our local legislators on budget impacts that would impact our students and our programs. The three that we're really watching right now is the governor's real estate tax freeze or tax cap proposal that's part of his turnaround agenda. What this would do is freeze our tax revenue for the next couple of years, which would put us in a bind since 79% of our money comes from tax revenues, and we are continuing to grow. Senate Bill 1 is a general state aid formula revamp, and they're looking for equity and equality in state funding. And under this bill, as it's currently written, Dunlap, because we have high property values, we would lose about 75% of our district's state revenue, or about $1.7 million a year. So that's a significant impact to our budget that we would have to find out a way to pay for locally. And then pension reform and the cost shift. As we all know, the government is having difficulty making their pension payments, and the Supreme Court found all of their reforms unconstitutional. So they are still having to find a way to pay for all of the pension costs. Currently, the state pays for all of the employer portion of the teacher's retirement. The plan to move and solve part of the pension problem is to shift that cost back to the districts. This would be about $3.5 to $4 million back on our district. That would be a direct hit to our budget that is not currently in the budget. So those are things that we watch very closely and talk with our legislators about quite often. As I'm sure many of you have asked, or you've heard others ask, why can the district afford to add on at the high school, but they can't afford to make my kids' class size smaller? And it really comes down to that school budgets are managed within a fund accounting structure. And we have 9 funds that are operated in accordance with the laws and regulations set forth by the state of Illinois. And each of these funds is its own independent entity with its own assets, liabilities, and fund balance. Each of these funds has a specific purpose that it's used for, and the funds have to be expended in certain ways. So our debt service fund covers the principal and interest of the district's bonds. The municipal retirement social security fund covers IMRF social security or Medicare payments. Capital projects fund covers construction paid for through bond proceeds. This is the example. The high school construction addition was done through bonds. The money for that were sold in those bonds was put into Fund 60, and that is the only thing that we can use that money for, is for the construction project. Working cash fund is really there to cover unforeseen expenses. No money can be directly expended from the working cash fund. The only way that money can be used from the working cash fund is if the board adopts a resolution to abate it to another fund that has a need. The tort fund covers insurance, lawsuit settlements, attorney's fees. It's the fund that we use to protect the district against risk and make sure that we are able to cover anything that could be a liability for the district. The fire prevention and safety fund covers safety projects and building projects that are approved by the State Board of Education and or are required by the State Board of Education to be sure that we're following all the codes and the safety and security regulations set forth by the state of Illinois. There are 3 more funds that we haven't talked about yet, and these are our operating funds. And these are the 3 that we use to run the district on a daily basis. These are the ones that that you see. You see in the buildings, and you see in transportation, and you see in the ed fund. So the education fund is $29 million of our budget, and it covers everything that's not specifically covered in other funds, but primarily it's everything that you see happen for your child when they're going through their school day or their school year. Operations and maintenance fund covers the maintenance of the buildings, repairing school buildings, property, lawn mowing, heat, air conditioning, lights. And then the transportation fund covers transportation, including the purchase of vehicles and bus insurance. We often get, well, can't you just move money from one fund to the other? And the answer seems simple, but it's not. So what's allowable by law is that we can transfer money between the education fund, the operations and maintenance fund, and the transportation fund. The issue that comes for our district is that we are levied to the extent that we can levy in those accounts, in those funds. So, and they are balanced, but they are barely balanced, which means there's no excess fund and excess money in any of those funds to move to another fund. So although we could transfer money, we don't have money to transfer. Then the other one is a line item transfer within a fund. 10% of a total fund's budgeted expenditures can be transferred between line items within a fund through a board approval. So an example of this is the ed fund is around $29 million, and we can move up to $2.9 million between line items without having to do a full budget amendment. This allows us to move money around with board approval to meet the needs of our district on a daily basis without having to go through the whole formal 30-day public review period, formal board adoption. We have to do a budget amendment if there's more than 10% of a fund needs to be moved to another line item, or if a fund as a whole is going to be over the total budgeted amount for that fund. And as I said before, a budget amendment requires the same process as the tentative and final budget adoption. Our revenue sources. We get revenue from 3 sources: local, state, and federal. Our local sources make up 88% of our budget. 79% of that is real estate taxes. 9% of that is other local revenue, which would be registration fees, participation fees, donations, school lunches, things like that. The state makes up 10% of our budget. 5% comes in the form of general state aid, which we as a district are allowed to determine how we want to spend that money to meet the needs of our students. The other 5% comes in categorical aid, which covers specific programs such as driver's ed, Bright Futures, special education. And 2% of our revenue comes from federal. And these are primarily in 4 categories, special education being the biggest one. Then Title I, which is our low income grant, Title II, which is a professional development grant for the teachers, and National School Lunch Program. Our expenses by object. This is where our expenses go. We are an educational institution, which therefore means most of our expenses are in salaries and benefits because we have to have people to teach the kids and to get the kids to and from school and to feed the kids. So 79% of our expenses are salary and benefits. 6% are purchase services. 9% are supplies and materials. 2% is capital outlay, which would be equipment, that type of thing. And tuition and other objects is for special ed and our bond payments. A bit of a look at our FY16 budget and where we are at this year. Our annual operating budget in all funds is a little over $45 million. Our equalized assessed value, which is what our property tax revenue is based on, is a little over $835 million. Our tax rate is 4.51%, which is the lowest tax rate in Peoria County. Our long-term debt outstanding is a little over $61 million, which is 55% of what we are allowed by state statute to bond. And our enrollment for this year is 4,415 students, which is 137 students more than we had last year. So we are continuing to grow and expand. So here's a chart that just shows student enrollment growth over the years. Back in 2000, we were at 2,270 students. Till today, we are at 4,415. So we have almost doubled where we were 15 years ago. That is massive and fast growth. These are our revenue and expenditures. This shows where we're at year over year from 2009 to 2015 in our revenues and expenditures. So you can see back in 2012 when we were having the budget issues that expenses were over revenues, and we've started to switch that curve around and level back out. This chart shows our year-over-year tax rate and where it has gone from year to year to year, and shows that we are currently at 4.51%. This chart shows our equalized assessed value increases year over year. So these are percents. So from 2000 to 2010, we increased at 11% or more every year our property value did. That meant we were bringing in that much more money every year in property taxes and revenue for the district. Then starting in 2010-11 year, it dropped down to 5.5%, then to 3.5%, then to 1.3%. And these are the years where you started seeing the district talked about financial difficulties. We did deficit reductions, and we are now moving back up with EAVs, and so the deficit reductions we've done and the efficiencies that we've enacted have helped us to balance the budget and move forward. The amount of our increase for the 15-16 year was 3.1%. It will also be estimated to be about 3.1% for the 16-17 year. This chart shows our equalized assessed values broken down by type. The red line at the top is residential. That is where most of our property value lies, and that is where we continue to see an increase. The middle line, the blue line, is commercial, and it has remained steady over the last few years, but we're hoping that it will go up in the future. And then the farm, industrial, state railroad is our lowest property value amount, and it has also been pretty level even further back than property value or commercial. This is just another chart that shows it in a bar form and shows how much it's increased, decreased, and the difference in the two. Okay, so this slide shows outstanding debt and shows how it's changed year over year. And as a growing district, that's normal that we would have growing debts, but we are starting to see a little bit of a downturn right now in our debt, so that's good. Our educational fund percent expenditure increases year over year, as you can see back in 2012 was 12.8%, when our revenues, our tax EAV only went up 5%. That shows where some of the budget difficulties came in. We are now looking at the last 2 years, 2.3 and 2.4%. So we are more in line with what our revenues are and our expenses that are increasing. If you went out to our website, you would see the budget in this form, and this first page, budget summary, shows estimated beginning fund balances, and then revenues expected, expenditures, and excess of direct receipts over direct disbursements. So as you can see, 7 of our 9 funds are balanced and in the black. 2 of them show in the red. The construction capital projects, Fund 60, shows in the red because the revenue for this fund came in 2013 when we sold the bonds for the construction project. But we are still expending money now, so it shows a deficit, but that is not, it's not really a deficit because we are under budget for the overall project. And debt services, this is in the red due to the federal government not paying their full portion of the Build America bond subsidies that they are supposed to be making due to sequestration. Summary shows our beginning cash balance on hand at the beginning of the year and what we expect the cash balance to be at the end of the year, and just shows kind of revenues and expenses going in and out from a cash side. The next 2 sheets, estimated revenue and estimated expenses, are line by line descriptions of where we expect all of our money to go. And you can see that line by line, function by function of where we expect it to be. So if you want to look at that while you're at home, you're welcome to do that, but this is how it goes to the state, and this is how the state sees us as spending our funds. But I wanted to go through that with you so you would know what you were looking at when you went out to the web. And then this is my most exciting page, not really, but it shows, this tells whether or not we need to do a deficit reduction plan. And so I'm always very excited when I see balanced budget, no deficit reduction plan required. This is exciting for us because there are many, many school districts that are required to do a deficit reduction plan, and we have been able to manage ourselves financially so that we do not have to, and we are very, very excited about that. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now, and what you have seen me talk about, if you've seen other presentations, you'll see this chart a lot, and this is what I use in presentations for a quick glance at our budget, and it shows the beginning fund balance for the year, what our expected revenues are, our expected expenses, and then whether there will be a surplus or a deficit. This shows primarily the same thing as the cash summary page does, except I don't think it's quite as intimidating. And then it shows our ending fund balance that we hope to end up with at the end of the year. The months in reserves with taxes and the months in reserves without taxes is one thing that's not on that budget summary page. And we look at this because this is what we know we have on hand if we never received another dime in revenue. And we use the months in reserves without taxes because that's the money that we have on hand that is not reserved to go to specific expenses the following year. And overall, we have 5.71 months, which means we could run the whole school district and pay all of our bills for a little under 6 months if we didn't get another dime of revenue. We're in better shape than some districts, but not necessarily where we'd want to be overall. Our ed fund is in good shape, and our transportation fund is in good shape. We would like to see more reserves in the operations and maintenance fund and our tort fund. Those are two where we are really low and are trying to figure out a way to be able to build those reserves so that we can make sure that we can maintain our buildings and protect the risk of the district. I want to thank you for joining me and listening to this presentation. Our next presentation will be on the tax levy, December 17th at the Dunlap Valley Middle School Spartan Theater at 8:30 in the morning. Thank you.